Hello everyone, I'm the Enforcer, and welcome to the breaking news. Please make sure to like, comment, subscribe, and support us on Patreon, link in the description below. Belarusian helicopters have flown over the Polish border today near the small village of Białowieża. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that correctly, although I know I have butchered that, and picture evidence was taken today from Polish citizens on the ground, showing that these helicopters had in fact flown over the border and were flying into Polish territory. Really quickly, before I continue on with the story, Polish governmental authorities have stated that these helicopters did not fly into Polish territory. They stated that these helicopters were observed from the other side of the border, inside of Poland, but the helicopters were in fact flying along the length of the border inside of Belarusian territory. However, first-hand accounts from the area are beginning to contradict this story quite quickly, as many people have said that these helicopters flew directly overhead, meaning that instead of being observed on the Belarusian side of the border, they were flying on the Polish side of the border. We can see an additional picture here of a Belarusian Mi-8, like we saw in the first picture, followed by a Belarusian Mi-24V. These two helicopters don't really pose much of a threat in themselves. However, the fact that they, according to Polish first-hand accounts in the area, flew over the Polish border 3 kilometers inside of Poland and then turned around and flew back out shows that there has been a serious breach of Polish airspace, at least according to their first-hand accounts. And every time I say this, I also have to say that the Polish Ministry of Defense has stated that these helicopters never flew into Poland. Whatever side you believe is the one you believe, the Polish Ministry of Defense, however, has incentive to say that these helicopters did not fly into Poland, because if they had, this would be cause for serious military escalation in between the Belarusians and the Poles, which is something that they're largely trying to avoid, and considering the minor level that this incident took place at, it wouldn't really be worth major escalation in between the Polish, the Belarusians, or NATO in the Russian world. And so that's probably why we're seeing that the Polish Ministry of Defense is making that statement, although people on the ground in that area said that these helicopters were flying directly overhead. They weren't flying well off into the distance in the Belarusian airspace. They were flying directly over their village, or in some places directly over their tourist centers and hotels. But moving on from the story, this is apparently being further flamed by statements from Lukashenko, where he is once again taunting the fact that Wagner troops are near to the Polish border. According to Reuters World, Lukashenko taunts Poland again over Wagner troops near the border. And from what we understand, this is a very serious situation in between the Polish and the Belarusians, as nearly 5,000 to 6,000 Wagner troops, from the numbers that have been publicly stated, are along the Polish border from Brest to Grodno, and they are currently trying to help Syrian migrants who have been stuck inside of Belarus since 2019 to breach the Polish border and make it to the other side, and even allow Wagner soldiers to exfiltrate the border and make it into Poland as well, most likely to serve as spies or advanced communication chains that could be used in the event of a Russian, Belarusian, or Wagner offensive into Poland, or in the event of border raids as well. This may also be the reason why those helicopters flew over the Polish border today. This may have been a continued part of the Wagner, or the Belarusians, working in unison to try and breach the Polish border area and to figure out how weak it is. And this is, of course, going to cause serious escalation in the future if these kinds of incidents begin to occur. Of course, the Polish are trying to downplay the seriousness of that incident right now, but we all know that if this starts to happen continuously, the Polish will have to respond, and the escalation will inevitably occur. And all of this is occurring at a very interesting point, historically for Poland, at least as far as holidays go. Because today, August 1st of 2023, is the anniversary of the Warsaw Uprising. And the Warsaw Uprising has a very interesting part in Polish history. The Warsaw Uprising, to summarize it in a historical context, was in the Second World War near to 1944, when Soviet forces were finally making their way on into Poland, and the communists in the area, the Polish communists and partisans, decided that that would be the perfect time to rise up and try and fight the Nazi Germans and help out the Soviets in taking the city of Warsaw. What happened was completely the opposite, as Joseph Stalin saw the Polish uprising as a threat to Soviet power in the area after the war, and he ordered for the entire Soviet offensive to be stopped dead in its tracks before it reached the city of Warsaw, so that way the Germans would end up fighting the Poles in the Warsaw Uprising and kill them themselves. This, in turn, wiped out the Polish resistance inside of Poland nearly entirely, and also heavily weakened the German army even further, and then led to the Soviet offensive beginning once again, but this time rolling over the corpses of dead Poles that they had not helped out in their own fight to try and liberate their very own country. This is something that the Poles have not forgotten to this day, and is the reason why the Polish people greatly resent the Soviets, more so even than the Germans, considering that over the next few decades after the end of World War II, the Polish would be a Soviet satellite state for the large part, but not only that, they would also be reeling from the suffering that the Soviets put on to the Poles, just like the Germans did during and after World War II. And today they are commemorating this inside of Warsaw, and we can see a picture right here of all of the people that have gathered around to commemorate the Warsaw Uprising and the 250,000 Poles that were killed in the 63 days of fighting inside of the city of Warsaw. And once again, a reminder of why they consider the Belarusian and Russian threat to be so serious, and also a reason why the Belarusians are trying to probe their border defenses with those helicopters, is to try and find out if such a thing may be able to happen in the modern world again, if the Russians really wanted to. But nevertheless, things have been developing around the world in some very interesting ways, and moving on south into the area of Crimea, there has been a very interesting attack that has occurred in this area today, and it does appear that it has caused some very serious damage to Russian supply lines and supply efforts in the area of Zaporizhia as well as Ukraine. This night, just a few hours ago, air defenses were activated over the Crimean Peninsula around the area of Sevastopol, and also near the area of Balaclava. Some of y'all may find that to ring a bell, the name Balaclava. And you would not be mistaken at all. Balaclava is actually something that many people have heard about before that hasn't been connected to Ukraine or Crimea or Russia at all. That is the headwear, the ski mask that many people know that bank robbers wear, skiers wear, such things like that. It is actually called the balaclava. And the reason why is that during the Crimean War, British women, and French women as well, would end up knitting these little headpieces for their boys to wear while they were over there in Crimea, and when they were sent over, they had this very distinct look, and that is exactly where the balaclava came from, and it was named after where the first shipment of these little knitted headpieces came to, which was the town of Balaclava in Crimea. And so from there forward, the name stuck, and balaclava became synonymous with the ski mask, or more so, the ski mask, which the balaclava is actually named for, would eventually come out of that as an origin. I butchered the explanation of that, everyone, so apologies in advance, but that's why you've probably heard of balaclava before. Nevertheless, air defenses were activated over the area, and it appears that the Russians were unsuccessful in intercepting their target as it landed, whether it be missile or drone, we do not know, but it did land onto an ammo depot in the town of Balaclava, leading to a severe detonation, and from what we can understand, this is most likely a significant loss of supplies. The preliminary reports indicate that it was an arsenal belonging to the 758th Logistics Center of the Russian Black Fleet. And that's big news, and that's a big deal. The Russian Black Fleet is probably the most supply-heavy force that exists within the Crimean Peninsula at this given moment. And the need for submarines to have a constant supply of fuel, the need for the surface fleet to also have a constant supply of fuel and weaponry as well, requires significant resources, manpower, and effort. And considering that Crimea is largely cut off from supplies at this moment, the destruction of a logistics center like that could lead to the Black Sea Fleet seriously being crippled in further missions, such as missile launches into Ukraine, and we may see that those have to be further curtailed or completely stalled in an attempt to try and get more supplies or to conserve the supply amounts that they currently have in Crimea. And so that is some fairly large, it is very significant news as a matter of fact, and wonderful to see that somehow the Ukrainians were able to strike all the way down in Balaclava, and not only that, make it through the air defenses and hit an actual logistics center, which is a purely strategic target of high importance. We'll probably be seeing that the Black Sea Fleet will operate less in the coming days, but of course we will have to wait and see, and we'll have to see if that becomes reality or not. That may also help in the larger sense to try and stop the Russian attempt of blockading Ukrainian ports, considering that they're going to have less fuel and less supplies and less ammunition to work with. They may not be able to intercept cargo ships in the Black Sea to an incredibly large amount, or even at all, based off of the damage that we're going to be seeing here and how the Russian Navy reacts to that over the next few days. And this may be a Ukrainian attempt to try and break that Russian blockade by destroying the supplies that the Black Sea Fleet operates off of. And if so, that is a very good strategic plan right there, is to destroy what feeds the Navy for the Navy to even function. Because without fuel and without ammunition, that Navy is completely worthless and completely unusable. And so it does appear that the Ukrainians are trying to come up with creative solutions to a very serious issue as far as the grain deal and Ukrainian blockades have been going so far in the war. But that is all the major news we have today. I thank you all so much once again for watching. If y'all did enjoy, please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, because we run these videos nearly 7 days a week, every single day, covering some of the breaking news of the war. And also we run live streams as well, 6 days a week at 10 p.m. Eastern Time, every single day, exact same time, covering the last 24 hours of the war in picture and video evidence. But thank you all so much for watching once again, and I will see you all in the next one.